Hi everyone, a very good morning to all of you. I'd like to keep this conversation. I would like to keep this as a conversation more than a presentation or a presentation of ideas, so that we discuss certain things and interaction is going to be extremely critical because we are in a context where unless you're used to this and unless you've been doing this for some time, and I'm sure we've been doing this for the last as a country, we've been doing this for the last almost 1 to 1.5 years now with how things have been. But let's keep the interactions going. So you can use the chat. You can use. You don't have to necessarily turn on your video, but you can always ask questions. You can raise a hand, or if you have a question, you can just you can just mention my name and you can say I do have a question. I do need to clarify something. So let's set some ground. Let's set some timings in terms of the breaks so that we exactly know where things are. Let's what I would suggest is let's do 10:30 for the morning break, so we have a 15-minute break there. And lunch, what is how would you would like to plan out your lunch break? I think that's a 1 hour break that you have asked for. So I'm totally fine with that. We could look at a specific time, then we'll know exactly where things are, and then we can plan out our session accordingly. So what do you suggest as a good timing for lunch? Okay, you all do need to you will need to voice your opinions, um, so that we all have a good time today, and we interact with each other. So any ideas on lunchtime? Shall we say I think somebody's 12:30? Okay, Tivanka, great. I like the 12:30 idea. Anyone has any other thoughts? If not, we could go with 12:30, 1:30 if you're good with that. 12:30 is okay. All right. So I think few are saying 12:30. All right. Okay. Okay, great. So let's keep 12:30 to 1:30 as our lunch break, and then we'll do an evening break at 3:30. Is that okay with everyone? 3:30 to 3:45, or we could even do 3:15 and then come back by 3:30, and we'll close. I think we're closing by 4 o'clock, or latest 4:30, right? In case we have questions and stuff that we want to clear up. 3:15 is good. Okay, great. Okay, you all are very comfortable with chatting, maybe chatting in the sense the message box, which is good, but I'd like to hear voices as well. Maybe we'll do that a little later. All right, everyone. So again, good morning, and I think all of us are excited about what we are going to talk about today, so we'll straight away get into that. um, so let's move on. So there are a couple of things that I want to establish before we kind of get into today's session in that sense. So our outline for today, what I thought is, rather than making this a very technical only discussion, I would like to, since we have a wider audience from different spheres of the organization, and your level of interaction on this particular subject could be very different, as well as it could be very relevant to you in certain areas. I thought we'll do a very generic sort of we'll get an understanding of what exactly these sort of components are going to do, and what sort of things we need to think about when we are looking at data and information and managing data and information. And we'll talk a little bit about certain very interesting fields that is very relevant to the new world that we are in, and this has been there for a while, but I think it's important that we look at these, especially in the context that we are in now, right? So we are going to look at data science, we are going to look at artificial intelligence, and as a whole we are going to talk about best in class standards in terms of databases, in terms of what are the service level agreements you need to think about, and what are the elements you need to be very careful when you are trying to manage this sort of an interaction, and how relevant it is to what you all are doing. Right now, I can see that there are certain people from quality assurance, there are certain people from finance, HR. So all of those entities, engineering, all of those entities actually have right those all of those entities are important when you think about what sort of a subject we are going to talk about. Think අපි අපි මේ database ගැන කතා කරන්න ගියාම ගොඩක් කට්ටිය මේක හිතන්නේ මාර ටෙක්නිකල් සබ්ජෙක්ට් එකක්, මේ අම්බෝ මේක මේ IT දන්න කට්ටිය තමයි දන්නේ, අනිත් මිනිස්සුන්ට මේක ඇත්තටම දන්නේ නැහැ. අපි මොකක් කර දුන්නාම අපි මොන හරි එකේ ගහනවා, ඉතින් ඒකම කොහේ හරි යනවා, ඊට පස්සේ ඒක නැහැ. ඉතින් database ගැන කතා කරනකොට අපි කතා කරන්න ඕනේ බිස්නස් කන්ටෙක්ස් එකත් එක්ක. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි කරන ව්‍යාපාරය සහ ඒකේ තියෙන සබදියාව මොකක්ද? ඒකට තියෙන ඒකත් එක්ක තියෙන මේ ඒකත් එක්ක අපි කොහොමද මේ කියන දේ අපි පාවිච්චි කරන්න කියන එක හරිම වැදගත්. ඉතින් ඒ ගැන කතා කරන්න තමයි මට ඇත්තටම අද අවශ්‍ය. ඉතින් අපි පොඩ්ඩක් මේ ඉස්සෙල්ලා බේසික්ස් ටිකක් කතා කරලා ඉමු. හරි, so that everyone is comfortable. Right, okay. So let's move on. So first and foremost, I would like to know how information, how you feel information starts, right? So because we need to understand data and we need to understand information, right? That's very critical. Both are not the same. They are interrelated clearly, but there are some very significant differences between these two, right? අපි යුනිවර්සිටි ලෙවල් එකේ අපි සමහරවිට හරි ඔය අපි මොන හරි රිසර්ච් කරනකොට හරි අපි මේ ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් ඩේටා කියන එකේ ඒ දෙකේ විශේෂණ මොනවද කියලා ඉගෙනගෙන ඇති. We would have spoken about it, but I would like to know from a very generic perspective, what is information and what is data? Would someone like to share their thoughts? You can unmute and speak. Don't worry. There are no right or wrong answers, okay?
හරිද? මේක හොස්පොට් ඔන් කරාම ඔකට ගත්තයිද?
Anyone who would like to say what is information and what's data? What is information about you and data about you? Let's make it very simple.
මේක මෙහෙම තියා ගන්නවා ඔකොතන යනවා. එතනින් ගලවනවා.
Mr. Good morning.
Good morning. How the
Yeah, I'm Devinder.
Hi,
actually,
Devinder.
I represent the training center. Yeah.
Sure.
For me, data is something that is already there, right? What we collect, the what's and what's not that are already there in there. But information is, I think, what we extract from data.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yes, very good, Devinder. Okay, it's a very interesting point. Extraction. That's a nice word in the context that we are talking about. Anybody else would like to give a different idea, or maybe something similar, or what do you think? Right now see, data about me is that I am married, right? But information is different. So that's what Devinder was trying to say. If you take my marital status, I go as married, so that's data in the context we talk about, right? Married, yes or no? But is that information? For it to become information, it needs to go through a bit of a process, right? It needs to go through a bit of a workaround, or you call it a bit of a massaging of that. That data has to go through a bit of a process for it to become information, right? So if you really look at it, right, if you really look at the context of how this is, there are a couple of things that we need to be very conscious of in terms of thinking about data and thinking about information, right? We have moved away from the world of raw facts and just gathering someone's some information, right? Some data or something which is bare minimum data, right? It's just text, just numbers, records, those days I remember in HR also there were employee data, but rarely it became employee information. Why? Because it never went through that process, right? So if you ask what's your staff, what's your staff strength, we have 30 people, and then how many of them are engineers, how many of them are what do you call finance people, so you break down and you think that's data. That's actually not data. That's not, you think that's information, but later we realize, oh my god, this is just data. There's nothing much we can do with it, right? And it's in a form of very unorganized manner, right? Yes, there are structures to it in certain aspects of it, but still there's nothing much you can do about it, right? There's nothing much you can do with it. It can be useful. I mean, knowing that I'm married may be useful, but beyond that is what is actually useful, right? It may be useful, may not be useful, and it's not very specific, right? It's not a very specific set of decisions that you can make with data, and does not really depend on information, right? Data can be alone. It can actually, there's so much of data that is captured right now, right? Even in this conversation, there's so much of data that is captured which is just there. No, it's up to us whether we want to use it or whether we don't want to use it, right? And that's where this whole concept of big data and everything comes in, which we'll talk about, right? Then information are what is known as facts. Facts are a little different, right? Facts are based on certain assumptions, certain pre-notions, certain prerequisites, certain conditions, certain variables. So all of these things come together to make facts. Then concerning a particular event or a subject, so it's very focused, right? It's about X or Y or A, B or C, right? And you can define it, and once you define that data, it becomes some sort of an information, right? Then it is based on some sort of analysis. Okay, some sort of analysis. It may be the right analysis or the wrong analysis, but it is based on some level of analysis. Then it is always, because for it to be analyzed, it needs to be organized. It needs to be organized, right? And then information, most often than not, and usually always, is very useful, right? We make use of information, we pay for information, right? And then it's very specific, right? So you should now start kind of thinking, when you think about an information system, okay, this is where lots of people kind of go a little astray or පොඩක් වරද ගන්න. මෙන්න මේක තමයි අපි ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් සිස්ටම් එකක් ගැන කතා කරනකොට මෙන්න මේවා තමයි ෆන්ඩිමෙන්ටල් බේසික්ස්. කියන්නේ ෆන්ඩිමෙන්ටල් එකේ ෆන්ඩිමෙන්ටල් කියලා තියෙනවා. අර බේසික්ස්ම දේවල්. අපි ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් සිස්ටම් එකක් ගැන කතා කරනකොට බේසික්ස් කියලා තියෙනවා. අන්න ඒ බේසික්ස් සමහරලාට ලොකු ලොකු අයටත් වරද්ද ගන්නේ මෙන්න මේ අන්ඩර්ස්ටෑන්ඩින් එකෙන් හිතුවේ නැති වුණා. කියන්නේ අපි හැම වෙලාවෙම හිතන්න ඕනේ අපි ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් සිස්ටම් එකක්ද හදන්නේ ඩේටා සිස්ටම් එකක්ද හදන්නේ කියලා. අන්න එතන තමයි මේ පළවෙනියෙන්ම අපි වරද්ද ගන්න තැන. ගොඩාක් දුරට අපි මිලියන ගණක් වියදම් කළා අපි හදන සමහර සිස්ටම් ඒව ඩේටා විතරයි. ඒකේ ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් සෙග්මන්ට් එකක් නැහැ. එක්කෝ ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් තියෙන සෙග්මන්ට් එක 102යි 103යි. එතකොට ආයි අපි ලොකු තව වියදමක් දරලා තව ලොකු දේවල් කරන්න ඕනේ. මේ තියෙන ඩේටා සෙට් එකකින් ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් කියන තැනට එන්න. අන්න එතන තමයි ලොකුම ප්‍රශ්නේ ගොඩක් ආයතන වලට තියෙන්නේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ අපි ඉන්ෆර්මේෂන් සිස්ටම් එකක් ගැන හිතනකොටම මෙන්න මේ කියන බේසික්ස් ටික පොඩ්ඩක් නෙවෙයි ඇත්තටම හොඳට කල්පනා කරන්න ඕනේ. හරි. කියන්නේ ඒ සිස්ටම් එකේ කොහොමද අපි data අරගෙන process කරලා information ගන්නෙ? මොකද්ද ඒ outline එක මොකද්ද කියන එක අපි හොඳට හිතන්න ඕනේ. හරි. ඔතනින් තමයි අද දවසේ අපි පටන් ගන්න යන්නේ. ඒ හින්දා මම කතා කරන්න කැමති මේ පොඩ්ඩක් definitions ගැන. right, ඒ definitions පොඩ්ඩක් තේරුම් ගන්න අවශ්‍යයි. මේකේ හරියටම ඔලුවට දාගන්න. මොකද මේක මේ IT දෙයක් නෙවෙයි. Whether you are in information technology, whether you are in engineering, whether you are in HR, whether you are in finance, these things are fundamentally important. Forget a system, okay? Forget spending millions and doing any system or doing whatever. For you to run a proper operation, a proper process, you need information. And information starts with data. And if you don't know how to manipulate data into information, you're going to have a huge problem, right? Now, if you take a finance process, having a list of debtors, that's data in this context, okay? That's not information, right? having information, having processable information about those debtors, right? Trends, uh, historic data, historic information, future predictions, information that you can actually think in terms of how do you turn a debtor into an actual payable customer, what is the relationship management part of it. Now that is information, right? Because having a simple set of I can pull out a list of debtors, yeah, that's nice, but what does it actually do? Does it actually help you with your business? It doesn't, unless you bring other pieces and kind of create a process where you can manage your debtors better, right? That is what we want to do with information, right? So data is kind of defined as this collection of facts, figures, texts, observations, symbols, everything. And this is where things get a little interesting in the world that we live in, because back in the day all of these were separated, right? Text, figures, observations, all those things were in different places. But now we see 83,000 messages for a day. Back in 1980s it was about 50 messages for a day. But now with Instagram, with WhatsApp, with Facebook, with TV, radio, any other forms of information or data that you interact with people, and if you have young people, if you I know if you have young children at home, you will know what I'm talking about. They will, because they are more tech savvy now, right? They will find different things and come and tell you different things, not like when we were younger, right? So then so much of so much of data, so some of them is data, some of them is actual information, right? And they are in different forms, right? So what we want to do when we think about data is, they could be event driven, they could be a process driven thing, and through data you can draw certain decisions if you manipulate data in the right sense, okay? If you use the right tools, if you have the right analytical mind to it, you can do that, right? And you would have heard this term called data scientist. That's partly what they do, right? It's when I say partly, because they use a lot of tools as well, but the understanding has to be there. I mean, you see, I can just give tools to anybody, but they can't do that job. The reason is you need to have that level of understanding to do that particular job, right? Then in terms of the unprocessed nature of data, it will have different things, and to different people it will mean different things, okay? Now for HR, if you say a certain KRA, they will get a different understanding of it, and it will make sense to them in that world. The same KRA or the same KPI to someone from finance, it might just be okay. We are doing payroll for x many people, and our cash flow is so much, so there is an issue for this month. But for HR it will be a different issue. The same set of data, it will tell a different message, right? HR will start thinking of grievances. They will start thinking of, okay, what is the process, how do we manage this, what are the other things that we can do. So see, the same set of data represents in same set of information is now talking different things to different people. Why? Because their domain is different. Now the advantage of having this singular component called databases and information system is, you and I who are from different departments can look at the same data and get ideas and inferences to make decisions which are relevant to your process. That's what we try to do with information systems, right? So moving forward, this you would have seen this, I think, in your university days, or this would be very familiar to you. So we categorize data into primary data. Then there's something called qualitative data and quantitative data. Quantitative data is actually, the world is moving out of quantitative data in that sense. Yes, there are still very basic data forms that we still use, quantity like 10, 15 numbers and x number of this, but we are now moving into qualitative information. Why? Because that is where decisions can be made. And then we have something called secondary data, which is more which covers internal data, which is relevant to you, relevant to your department, relevant to your organization. But we are moving away from that, and we are talking about external data, which is more important to you, because it talks about your customers, it talks about your staff, outside of the normal, structure that you have, because we've realized along the way, the last 20 years or so, that quantitative data, when you use it with external data, when you combine both of these, you make better decisions. Okay. There's so much of actual valid information for you to make a better decision, right? So that is why we talk about these things. So I'll give you a small example, right? Now if you look at primary data, and you are simply looking at qualitative data, right? Let's not worry about the old school quantity stuff. um, Now we can ask a couple of questions, right? Now when you think about, let's say, even if you think about a competitor, okay, let's say, let's take very simple example of, Sri Lankan tourism versus other tourism industries in the world. Okay, are we doing better than our competitors? Now that question cannot be answered simply with quantitative data. You need to have qualitative data to actually give a more valid answer to that question, right? You can't simply look at, okay, we had, so I mean, I still see this, right? I still sometimes in the news, people still say, in 2000, and whenever, of course, now tourism is, everybody's kind of in a bad place, but in 2019 we had X many, we had millions, so many millions coming to Sri Lanka, and we had so many dollars circulating. That doesn't, okay, that's great in the old world, right? That's like 25 years ago, that information would have made a lot of sense, but now there's no point talking about it. You need to actually understand the qualitative nature of that information, and actually not that information. The right question is not that, right? The right question is, I mean, are we doing well enough for the customers we want to attract and retain? Because that's the whole thing. And each business will have different questions that you need to ask. Okay. So I mean, when you say we are doing better than our competitors, one thing is, are we doing better? That depends on so much of qualitative data, and in certain areas we may be doing really well, other areas we may be doing not so well, right? But more important, when you look at that data, when you look at that information, what you need to be asking is, how are we attracting people, how are we retaining people, what is the correlation between these two, right? How do we ensure that for the next 15 years also we can keep doing this, right? And that is simply not just coming up with great ideas, but for the great ideas to come out, you need to have qualitative ways of analyzing data and making it actual information, right? So if you look at qualitative information or data, right, it's about the whys, right? Why does this happen? Why does this don't happen, right? Why does it happen like this, and why doesn't it happen like that, right? So sometimes when you even in organizations, or you look at X country and you look at Y country, and you try to do things here, but without asking the why, without asking what is relevant to you, and things fail, and then we say, oh, that system is not good, or this system is not good. But the real issue is, it's not the issue with the system, it's just how we implement it. We should have asked a lot of whys and not what. Okay, we asked what is the system, we never asked why, we never asked the context of that question, right? So now even if you look at simple airline, I've used a lot of airline related, aviation related examples here, because I think it may make more sense to you, because you are from that particular industry, right? Now if you look at some of the parameters that the industry itself looks at, finding out why passengers prefer one airline to another, or whether they are being drawn or pushed towards one specific airline. Like, if you compare between airlines, I mean, before this COVID situation, one of the airlines that was really doing well was Virgin was doing very well, right? At one point, Air Asia was doing extremely well, and I think if you study why they were doing well, you will realize that one of the reasons that they were doing well compared to Emirates or Lufthansa, or even some of even Singapore Airlines, even though Singapore Airlines was categorized as the best airline in the world, it wasn't simply because of the money that they made, because of the quality of the delivery. but if you simply look at the trend that was going, it was mainly towards no fringe, but basically budget airlines. Why? Because people wanted to travel, and the experience was to actually get to a destination, not necessarily how I fly there, right? The market has shifted, right? Back in the day, it was whether I fly economy class or whether I fly business class. What is the how what are the nice things that I will get while I'm in flight. But people have shifted, right? People are no longer so interested in whether it's an economy class or business class. I mean, obviously, if you go to the airport and if you're upgraded, you'll be very happy. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really drive the market. What drives the market is the fact that, okay, how fast can I get there? How convenient is my experience? Can I book online? Can I pay online? Can I check in online? Is the process hassle free? Is it cheaper? And will it get me there on time with in relative safety? Because if you're flying, there's always a risk, right? Just like you're crossing the road, there's a risk. So in life, there are risks. So people are more risk aversive, nowadays. So the catch wasn't whether you get a 4-course meal or a 3-course meal. So airlines had to really think their business model, right? And it had to be about creating an experience there also. Okay, so and now people have moved away from kind of looking at that whole part of the game, and now moved into, when I get to X place, what do I do there? How can I save my money and go there and do what I want? So the questions are more qualitative rather than quantitative. Okay, so it's all about so whenever you think about data and information, always think about combining. The whole thing is you combine many different aspects of information, not simply one element. And another thing that you need to think about information is, are we asking the right questions and in the right order? Okay, that's also another important thing, because how people answer certain questions will all depend on the order of asking those questions as well, right? So this whole structured thinking needs to come into when you build certain systems as well, right? And the right number of questions as well, right? So the right order, the right number, and whether it is the right question to ask. Okay, and since now we are thinking about cloud, and we're thinking about so many other aspects. I mean, no longer are we thinking about this server sitting somewhere and everybody putting information there, and if something happens to the server, oh my god, ibarai. No longer are we in a world like that, right? So we always think about how can we get information from different places and ensure that there's this seamless asymmetry of information available, right? Asymmetric in the sense, it's a relatively it's a moving object rather than a stationary thing. So information is now all about spotting things, right, before they become a problem, right? I mean, one of the things that we could do in the context that we are in right now in Sri Lanka, and this is something that we've been speaking to certain people on, and I don't want to talk about different things, but at the end of the day, we are really not making use of information in the context that we're in right now, and information is critical. Okay, information is not about contact tracing. Information is about actually using demographics. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about more. If we had one thing is, if we had thought about this ages ago, at least 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we could have actually built up responding systems that would have helped us in a crisis like this, right? But the biggest issue that we have right now is not that we don't have it's not that we are in an economic crisis and dollar is going up, or we don't have enough vaccines or whatever. I mean, yes, all those are issues, but the biggest issue is, as a country, we lack information. We have a lot of data, right? You ask 10 different departments, 10 different ministries, they'll give you data, you can drown in it. However, none of it is information, right? Because we don't have information, our decision making and decision support systems are failing, right? The information that you have is different to the information I have, so I can't correlate, right? There's no coefficients, there's no correlations. So people who need to make decisions on the ground have to rely on, you know, either misinformation or just, okay, I go with my gut because that is as good as the information I have, right? So that's the biggest issue, because if you had that information, you could have made better decisions, you could have planned better, you could have executed better. And this is what I want to actually talk about today as well, what each of you from, you know, from very different places in your organization who are playing very strategic roles need to think about in terms of putting up this level of information where you can make better decisions. And information is all about making better decisions, right? If you know that I am married, that's data. But if you know I am married to so and so likes so and so things, you can market something to me so that I will buy that, so that my so and so will be happy. That's the difference between data and information, right? So we need to think like that. We need to think a lot better than that. I'm just using a very simple, very layman example, right? That is why Google, Facebook, like you would have noticed, right? If you Google something, let's say you Google for a car, let's say, you know, Honda Prius something, all of a sudden on your taskbar, on your, you know, bar, they will start sending you information about places that you can buy vehicles, people who are offering vehicles, deals, vehicle detailing, all of that, which is relevant to what you search. And you're like, how on earth did they know, right? Imagine if you visit a certain place, right? Maybe if you visit a clothes shop, or if you visit a certain restaurant, all of a sudden on your Google, on your Facebook, you start seeing advertisements which for similar products. How do you think they do that, right? They do that because they are now going behind information that is relevant to you. They're not looking at data. No longer are people looking at data. People are looking at information, and they are connecting pieces from different places so that they can market. This is marketing, not the traditional marketing also, right? This is AI related marketing, using information to make better decisions when they market certain things. So you will also now you will also start looking at those and start thinking, yeah, you know, I could also, let's check this out, let's check that out. You might make a purchasing decision based on that. I'm using a very I just told you a very simple example. Now, moving forward, right? Those days we used to use these Likert scale analysis, right? We still do, but now we have actually gone from Likert scale analysis to perception building, okay? Because now what we are trying to gauge is perception. What is the perception that we have, that a certain thing that we do, what is the perception that creates, okay? What is the perception that creates? Because that's critically important to make a decision in terms of making our product better than somebody else's, right? And when you think about human beings, they are more quantitative in terms of finances and things like that. But when it comes to decisions, they are more qualitative. Okay, now we will look at, okay, this product is this product is 100 rupees, this product is 1000 rupees. I would like to have the 100 rupee one, but our information doesn't stop there, right? We want to, okay, for 100 rupees, what are you actually offering? What is what is it made of? Can it last for 5 years? Will it break in 2 years? Like that. Okay, so there's an interesting question. Is the information gathering for marketing purposes through our internet legal? Won't that make our identity vulnerable? Well, actually it is legal because you actually sign up for it, right? I know we may have not read it in that sense. In the fine print of all of this, they've actually said that we are using, and you can always choose, right? You can choose to opt out. Okay, and this is the beauty of how this is how talented you need to also think in terms of gathering data, right? Now in Sri Lanka, of course, nobody, there are plenty of service providers who don't actually ask you for ask you for permission. Ideally they should, right? But if you really look at Google and all the other social media platforms, they actually ask you for permission, and because we don't really read it too much, we given them permission, and you can always take it out. If you go to your settings, I'll give you some very simple explanations. If you go to your settings, if you go to advanced settings, there are options, privacy, and there are privacy settings. You can actually stop them from monitoring certain things. Even when you download a certain application, there are options like while using that application, can we have access to your location information, right? And people, what they say, and thing is this, right? People don't really look at these things. They'll say yes to everything. You'll just yes gagahana. If you don't want to be a part of it, you actually can opt out. Because they've asked the questions, they have every right to use your information. Is that legal? Absolutely. Is it ethical? It all depends on whether you want to be a part of it or not, right? You can always opt out. You can always say, okay, I don't want to use Google. That's an option. It might make your life a little difficult, but that's an option, right? There are people who say, no, I don't want any social media platforms or any sort of interactions with them, and you don't see that a lot in Sri Lanka, but especially in the European Union, especially in the Western especially in the North Americas, people are very, very concerned with how information about them is used, right? Even if you call them up and ask them, am I speaking to so and so, they will not simply say, here we will say, am I speaking to Chintaka, we will and we'll just carry on. But people are very, very concerned. They don't simply say yes or no. Even they'll ask you, well, who are you, why are you calling me, what is the purpose of this call, why do you want my name, how did you get my number? All of these need to be answered before even get into a conversation. So it's because the way they are brought up and the mentality around this is very different. Why? Because it's your information. So very, very valid point. Is it legal? As long as you have said yes, it is absolutely legal. There's nothing much you can do about it. Is it ethical? To a larger context, it is, because you have given permission. In certain aspects, it becomes unethical if you have not given due respect to that data, and if you have shared it with third parties. Okay, then so in terms of a business, let me just kind of draw your attention to this as well. In your business, the aviation industry and related regulatory information, when you think in terms of vulnerability of information, right? And vulnerability is another aspect of information that we talk about. There are many ways that you can protect yourself from being exposed or being how can I say, you can reduce the risk of being vulnerable, right? There are ways that you can do that, and I'll talk about some of them. But what we are talking about today is how do you make use of information about, okay, one thing is the customers that you work with, and the interdepartmental interlinking segments that you work with as well, so that your business risk, the vulnerability of business risk becomes lower, and your scalability, or how can I say, your sustainability of business becomes a little bit better, right? There's no guarantee of anything. Certain guarantees are there, but you can make life business life a lot better if you can create certain can you reduce the vulnerability of it, right? Okay, so let me move on to the other stuff. I hope what we spoke of is clear. And what we try to do is, as I mentioned, we try to understand the correlations and the coefficients, strength of these things. These are very old school terminology, but in the new world also we are using information in a very strategic way to make those sort of very, very strategic sort of decisions, right? So what we try to do is, rather than just scoring on 1 to 10 basis, you go into the details of it, right? So I think that's pretty much clear. So in terms of business support, right, if you try to minimize the risk, and you try to mitigate the risk. That's what you want to achieve with information in terms of performance information, in terms of very sensitive information. You want to reduce the risk, and in a case where there is a risk, you try to mitigate that risk, right? You try to find the right balance in that sense. Then let's talk a little bit about external data, right? Which is predominantly information that is coming from, that is available outside to you, which is very critical. Okay. So there are a couple of components, right? There's something called social media, which I think all of us are familiar with, which is called social data. Some people call it social data. Some people there's this other component called shared data. There's open data, and there's something called paid data. Paid data is obviously you need to pay and obtain that information, that data set, for you to make use for your business. But there are people and organizations who do sufficient research and collect data for you, for others to buy, right? So social media and platforms, including metadata. Metadata is basically location, time, language, biographical, geographical sort of information, which is one of the fundamental aspects of information that people and organizations use. Now, the same question about Google and Facebook using, they use a lot of social media, like where you went, what did you eat, all of that, right? And that's like fundamentally your lifestyle, right? Your lifestyle related information gets captured on social media now. Then you have shared data, which is again a very critical component, and this is where in Sri Lanka we unfortunately don't see this too much. But if you take an example like Italy, let's say I'll give you a very simple example, right? In Italy, okay, if you have ever flown, and if you have had to go through certain situations, whenever you enter the European Union, there's an information system that is shared between the European Union and certain other entities, right? So let's say you enter from Belgium. Okay, Belgium doesn't really belong to the European Union in that sense. It's more Bernox in that sense. But if you enter Italy, the example, let's say you enter Italy and you do a bit of traveling and you go to France. Let's say you had some minor offense in Italy, and you didn't turn up at you didn't be able to pay the fine, or you forgot to submit a certain document or something. You'll get pulled up way before you enter France, right? Because the systems talk to each other, and the minute you enter France through the legal means, obviously, unless you drop out of the sky, the minute you enter France, they will pull you up, and the customs or the border patrol or the police will actually take you from the airport itself and tell you, here there's an offense that you have not paid. So there'll be some consequences, right? Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, where there are so many entities and ministries working together, we don't see this shared information. But if we had that, like I said, even in the context that we have right now, we would have made far better decisions, and far more economically savvy decisions than what we are going through at the moment. So that's one thing is the lack of information. The other thing is the need to create that information, right? So two issues, right? Then we call open data, which is available freely, that you can use. Some companies put out this information because it helps them to create marketing collateral, and creates that natural buzz about how things should go. That's part and parcel why they do that. And there's something called paid information that you need to pay and obtain through information brokers. There are certain agencies now, Gartner and McKinsey, they do paid they do research, and they actually, you can buy research from them and information and data from them, because they have paid certain entities and they have obtained it. All very legal, all very ethical. So that's the right way to do it. So without fishing for information, you can actually pay and buy. So all of these, all four of these type of data and information is very relevant when you're trying to make business decisions, right? So in the aviation, if you take purely this particular subject in the aviation industry, um, there's so much of data, there's so much of information in the aviation industry that happens without anybody actually initiating anything, without anybody having to do a lot of work. Unfortunately, that information is not used. Okay, so if we actually do that, we can make very good projections. Okay, that's what some countries actually do, and they know exactly, even okay, during this period of the year, we should not even do this. We should not even try to do these sort of things, because it's just not gonna, the return on investment is not worth it. So you just stop and you focus on very few things. uh, if you don't have that information, you can't make better projections and predictions, right? Then for finance, cost control and mitigating business risk, right? Not just finance, but more strategy, right? Improving business valuations, right? If you have data, one of the things that when you value a business, right? Because we get involved with valuating certain businesses potential. When you do that, you look at the amount of data and information they actually have and what they make use of. Depending on that, the valuation goes up or down, right? And then this is very critical, especially in the aviation industry, and for any industry in that sense. Benchmarking, right? Benchmarking is actually looking at what you do to what the industry does as a whole, and you benchmark it against certain parameters, and try to aspire to go to that level, or actually you try to see whether your processes align for you to get there, right? So benchmarking again is important, and it only way you can do that is with the right level of information, right? Okay, so then I spoke about this, this social media, which is now people hashtag on everything. So the reason why people hashtag is when you use the right sort of search engine optimization, and there's something called search engine optimization, and then when you use the right level of hashtagging, if you know what you're doing, you can drive business towards you and not towards your competitor, right? So that's another way of looking at it, right? So contact information, location information, social media information, pictures that people share, all of that gets used when you think about personalizing something for you, right? And then let's talk a little bit about how does actually this um, the, using this in context to what we talk about, how do you actually make sense of it in the real world, right? So I wanted to just speak about a little bit about some industry level information, right? And I'll use a lot of these sort of examples throughout the day, um, right? Traditional systems, okay, traditional processes actually didn't use too much of sharing, okay. So airlines and airports traditionally do not share so much of information about their customers, traditional systems, okay. And this is another consulting that people have done now. Lufthansa, who's part of it's a German company, uh, they are consulting arm, so they have a consulting arm as well, right? um, in order to kind of create this very seamless journey, because see, one thing about these sort of industries is it's all about experience, right? It's all about creating that experience from the minute you think of even going to a certain country. From that, even to push somebody to think, okay, come to Sri Lanka, even that putting that thought in is a very strategic initiative. It's gone are the days where people will look to come to X and Y. We have to now motivate them, encourage them to take that decision, and that itself has a lot of intelligence behind it, right? So when you think about seamless travel from one air, let's say you fly a particular airline from one airport to the another, from one airport to the other airport. um, it was very difficult back in the day, because every airport or every authority works on their own. We don't talk to each other, right? So it's very difficult for an industry to work like that, because you're thinking about this entire journey, okay. You're thinking about an entire journey for a passenger from A to B to C until the end destination, and vice versa, right? um, so they actually came up with this flexible security lanes, and this you can really see when you go outside of Sri Lanka. You really see how this whole convenience factor comes in, right? And they use a lot of they use a lot of information, and not just simply paper based information, right? Numbers of passengers who have already checked in. No, that's why this whole concept of checking in before you actually go to the airport is so much valid, right? I think lots of Sri Lankans also have now taken that into account, and they check in before they go, and now airlines have also pushed people to actually check in before they go, so that you take out so much of redundancy. And the reason for that is actually why airlines actually do that is because they realize, authorities have realized. Sorry guys. All right, sorry about that. So um, they've realized if you use complementary software, like complementary solutions, video surveillance, data points, online transactions, online check-in, you can actually increase the commercial value of certain areas in the airport. See, one of the things that we I think we really need to think about is I'm not too sure how many of you have flown to again I'll use a very simple example. I'm not too sure how many of you gone to Malé airport, right? When you go to Malé, mainland, there's one airport, so it's only one airport. You go to Malé airport. The, 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 the space is limited, but it's extremely how can I say it is it is well used in terms of revenue generation, right? Their duty free is catered to the international market. They are not it's not catering to the Maldivian who goes here and goes there and comes back. It's for people who are in transit, okay, from Malé to wherever, who people who come to visit Malé, and then comes to Malé and then goes to a resort. So it's to generate business, and all of their branding, all of the things that they have done is to create that very short, it's a very short journey through Malaya, the duty free. It's not very lengthy, but what you see, what you experience, and what you want to purchase, the purchasing power is very high. So they've realized that you can actually make a lot of money. Now, if you, the first time I went to JFK, that is in the US, it's a massive airport, right? There's domestic, there's international, and there's like this. If you ever gone there, you would have noticed from New York, you can get into a train. There's a specific like a shuttle. You can get into the shuttle and you can go into the airport terminal, right? I mean, it just you don't have to pay for a taxi or anything. You just get on the shuttle and you that's what I used, right? And when I first used it, um, it was like, oh my god, they've thought of so many things. And I'm talking, this is in 2007, okay, 2007, no, 2008, I think 2007. So now it has gone to a different level. When I flew back in 2008 and 2009, I could see the transition they were doing, right? So it's every space in that airport, they have thought about it in terms of commercial areas, right? Even the lounges, now there are lots of free places, right? You can rest and you can relax, and even the coffee bars, everything is strategically done to 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 increase the revenue. Why? Because they use a lot of data. They use a lot of, not data, they use a lot of information. And I think that's the sort of trend we also need to think about in terms of, now we have lots of airports, right? I mean, yes, some, not all of them are international, but I think if we can think in terms of information and using information, even I feel Bandaranayaka can our airport can increase in revenue so much if we actually think a little bit more and do certain things, rather than making it very people dependent, right? Now from the minute you get into the airport, it's like very people dependent processes are there, but we need to think in terms of information and intelligence, and really shift things around, right? So that you make even small airports, like now in US, Birmingham airport. Birmingham is this, a little area in southern part of the US. That's a part international, part domestic airport. When you go in there, you can really see how they are making use of information about you to make money, right? Because the only way the airport makes money is, uh, if people spend money there, right? I mean, you really can't make so much of money out of airlines and etc., because the cost is very high, right? There's so much cost elements there. So commercial areas, commercially viable areas, that's what people, so making space work for you in terms of finances is what most people, most industries or authorities try to do. So that is why I bought this kind of example, so that you will also start thinking in different aspects, right? Okay, so that's fun. So do you have any questions as of right now? Is what have I made sense up to now? Do you all have any questions you all want to ask me at this point? Anything? Anything at all? Okay, if not, we'll move on. So we are at roughly 10 o'clock. We'll move on to the next segment, and let's take it from there. So let me speak a little bit about databases, okay? I thought this will be interesting for people who are not from the IT world, not from the world of IT, but who will kind of get an understanding and appreciation in terms of what we need to do, right? Um, okay, so let's look at how we kind of think about. So what we can do is, let's figure out whether we can move on to different aspects of databases. So let's not think too much about this whole IT stuff, right? Let's look at how we can think of in terms of databases of in terms of what we are used to, right? So can okay, maybe somebody can explain, some of the databases that they've used, right? um, I can I ask Asanga, are you there with us? Asanga, what sort of databases, what do you understand when somebody says, um, when you think of a database, like what have you been used to? Asanga, Iresha, if you guys can just give us some ideas. Janaka,
Are you?
yes.
I believe that you people are listening to this, or are you people just keeping the connection on? Iresha, I see you. Hello. Are the members there, or are we just not having the members there? They're in there. Hello, Janaka.
Hi,
Hello, Janaka. Okay,
hi, I'm here.
yeah,
I'm listening.
yeah, great. Because
Yeah,
when we are raising a question, no one is responding. I do not know whether they just keeping the window open and then not because it's one-sided conversation. Please participate because I'm
sure, sure.
asking you. Yeah, I see all the others are muted, but are they there? Any chance that we can find out? We can't be asking Divankar, Sampath, then like that. Because when we raise a question, no, it's a question, no? I'll mute myself.
So yeah, so maybe one or two of you can probably tell us what you have been accustomed to as databases. Anything from what you all are used to. Not any ideas what a database is from your level of understanding. There, I mean, again, no right or wrong answers. It's just ideas that we are trying to generate. What sort of databases have you all been part of? Tivanka, Sampath. There are two Sampaths. Anyone?
Yeah, it is organized table-like information, right?
Uh, you gave a very technical answer. Okay, but no, like what sort of databases have you been a part of? Like maybe in university. Have you come across any databases that you made use of? Sometimes in when you go for a when you try to have people reached out to you through banks and all, asking for whether, sir, would you like to have a loan, something like that. And all those things are part of it all starts from a database actually. And databases are not technical. I mean, back in the day we never had technical databases, right? There used to be people who would generate, who would kind of type out so much of stuff, and that would be the database, that would be your databases. So what sort of if others can also tell me what sort of databases have you been part of. Now I'm sure there are people from HR and there are people from finance. So engineering, I know engineering of course uses a lot of
Yeah, I am Nalkore.
sorry.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we have that our civil engineering database for that our employees and our assets and everything. So then we have that there are some codes for assets and all that, and for engineering that we are having that that data for our workers, addresses, where
So
they are, what is the
right.
address. So then when there is some COVID activity, then how we have to inform. Those things are in our database.
Right. So do you all use an ERP system or
Yeah,
uh,
at the moment we are using ERP system for that for entering our attendance and all that. So then
Stores.
so
yeah,
in terms of
attendance and HR for
HR
it.
related? Okay, okay.
That's a database.
Yeah, so interestingly, this is Noel, right? Or
Yeah, yeah.
hi. So Noel, interestingly, just to share, I had a when Dr. Ajit was here. I think you may be familiar with Singapore Airlines and how they use some of these how they use the information systems they have. In terms of how to make, I mean, they are one of the best in terms of the quality ratings they get for their maintenance and overall structural maintenance of the aircraft, and uh, as well as the aviation what do you call the terminals that they have, right? I was looking for the right word.
Yeah, yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
in yeah, so it's interesting if you do a little study. I was actually one of the things that we were trying to understand is how do you get to that level, right? And he was laughing at us and he was saying one of the most simplest tools that they use is a very detailed mechanical checklist. And we were all thinking, oh my god, they must be using so many sophisticated systems. But what he was saying is people need to think of information and data in a very different way, that even a simple tool like a checklist, one of the most fundamental tools that mechanical engineering engineers use is a checklist, and they are very dependent on that checklist, right? From one shift to another shift, there's a very clear and a precise handover of checklist. And he was saying our information systems are good enough to do that, but
Yeah,
we
no, no,
need.
no. We have that. Now we have that. For the maintenance, we have a pre-planned maintenance things So then, therefore, those maintenance work we have checklist. So then we have to check
Sure.
which
Yeah,
is
I'm just thinking.
done.
Yeah. I'm sure you
All the
have.
works are all the details are there, and we have to collect those details and submit to civilization authority for their that for their
Right, and one of the interesting things that he was sharing, and recently also I have put that example here for later use, is how there's this concept called preventative maintenance through AI. Okay, so
yeah, preventive.
yeah, preventative maintenance through AI, and that is what Boeing and Lockheed Martin. That's some of the technology, that's some of the concepts that they are using when they for so there are particular like sensors and things that they use with relevant information systems. They use to actually they know 6 months ahead uh, at what point this engine will fail, and at what altitude, even the journey, they are able to say, okay, you need to kind of divert at a certain point, because your engine will have more stress at this particular point, right? I mean, that's the level of information they I mean that's the level of the information they use to make certain decisions. So I mean, that's just on AI in terms of using that level of info. But yeah, so thank you for sharing that. So any others who are who are using, don't think about systems, what is the most simplest database that you are actually using that you may not have thought about too much? If I think most of you have a I think all of you now have a smartphone, right? Android or iPhone or something. You would use, I mean, your contact list. Okay, your contact list is one of the most fundamental databases that you have, right? And now if you look at your phones, back in the day we just had the name, right? And if there were a couple of Ajits, then you had to, like, put a star and this thing, or make that name very specific. If not, you don't know who that Ajit is. But now you can see, you notice how much of information gets captured, information, not data, information gets captured on your mobile phone, right? Even through the database that you use, right? Even the contact list database, right? And that database is linked with WhatsApp, with other social media platforms. Why? Because that's the level of connectivity that people expect now, right? We expect when we type something on our phone to for it to be there with all the other platforms as well. So I mean, that's the level of databases that we are looking at in the age that we are talking. Think our children, what sort of databases will they be working with? What sort of data and information elements will they be working with 5-10 years down the line, right? Especially with the context that we are now operating in. So databases, I know we tend to think they are very sophisticated and all those, and yes, they can be, but database is a very simple and a very useful concept, right? So I want to talk a little bit about in terms of databases, what sort of information and how it will be relevant to you, and what we need to think about in terms of database. So I think you are all aware of the International Civil Aviation Organization. I think most of you would be interacting with this particular entity. So this is a UN backed, okay, United Nations backed entity. I'm sure you are aware of those so they regulate certain processes. They regulate certain things like safety, security, overall efficiency, and the regulatory requirements in civil aviation. And they actually collect a lot of information, and this information is available to authorities all over the world to make use of, to plan, to put safety precautions in place for technical for technical evaluations, and the whole point is that they thought of this some years ago. They thought, if we make information available to people who need this information, who can make use of this information, our industry will become better, right? And in a way, I think aviation is one of the industries that has actually made a lot of progress within a very short period of time, right? Now, if you look at how airline crashes, okay, if a airline, if a plane crashes, there's so much of investigation that happens, and that's a very open investigation, right? Everybody gets to know. Even the public can have access to that information, so that you see that firsthand, right? And pilots, aviation authorities, all of them get to know this information. The manufacturers get to know this information, and there's so much of transparency, right? What that does is, it gives us more security when we fly. We are more susceptible, we are more penetrable, we are more willing to fly, because we kind of we understand the safety that it creates, right? But if you look at medicine, right, and this is the classic example, right? If you look at medicine and medical profession, the simplest thing that they tell you when something goes wrong is there was a complication, but God knows what happens. Why? Because there's very little transparency. Now, in certain parts of the world, now if you take the US, if you take Europe, information, I know in Sri Lanka because of the Right to Information Act, but still it's very difficult to get information. In those parts of the world, if a patient dies, the family has absolute right to know exactly what was the procedure, who did what, when did this happen, what was the medicine that was used, all of that, right? That information is made available, on request, okay? But whereas if you take the aviation industry, that information is pulled out, is dissected, is looked into as part of the discipline in that industry. But in medicine it's different, right? Even in parts like Europe and all that, you have to want an investigation. It doesn't just happen. Why? Because they feel if you own up to certain things, the whole profession, it's like we are gods, and all those things. But you can see the results, right? I mean, there are so many people who die on the operating table and through certain procedures that could have been prevented if information was available. But there are so many accidents that are prevented in aviation because of the fact that they expurgate so much of information out of a single accident, right? Today's planes don't crash, okay? Yes, when a plane crashes, the people feel bad, and there's so much of talk about it, there's so much of transparency, there's so much of information, and you avoid so many things that can go wrong. But take a hospital on a single day, how many preventable deaths happen, right? In Sri Lanka, outside of Sri Lanka, how many people have that have died because the surgeon got it wrong, the doctor gave the wrong medicine, something happened and it was told it was a complication, right? But the family doesn't know, the industry doesn't learn from it. See, this is the difference between being transparent and being being very transparent about information, right? So I just wanted to take you through some of the databases that we use on a day-to-day basis, right? And these are concepts, right? These are concepts that are used not only just in the database structures that we use, but even on our mobile phone. The database is structured in that way, right? So one of the simplest databases that we use, and the most commonly ones that we come day to day with, is what is known as a relational database. So by the name itself, you can understand that there are a bunch of tables. They are independent in that sense, but they're all linked in linked with each other through certain mechanisms, right? So when you access one table, through the accessing of that particular table, you can get information from different tables into one layer and make a decision, right? And databases are the fundamental concept behind a database is that it should be accessible, it should be secure, and it should be relatable, right? It should have the data that is relatable. So each table is independent in their own way, but linked to other tables through a very specific structured mechanism, right? And relational databases, or what we call RDBMS, relational database management systems, is the most commonly used database system that all of us know. Even the database I think Noel was talking about, that's a relational. If it is on a SAP, or if it's SAP or ERP, most of it is done through relational database mechanisms, right? So it's a very common thing, right? Then the other thing is these object oriented databases. So how you kind of define object oriented is data, and how you retrieve that data is what we call a method. They are stored in some way of calling them an object. Okay, so an object could be the name staff is an object, right? And you can say engineering staff is an object, and they're all classed as staff of Sri Lankan Aviation Authority, like that. So they are broken down into certain classes, and there's a method that you need to call them. You need to retrieve that information, and these are all listed down as objects, right? So this is another very common database mechanism that you use. Now if you look at some of the more established, and we'll go there, established and proper database mechanisms that are there in the world, either use relational databases, or they use object oriented database mechanisms, and the process that they do that in is either of those two. We no longer use flat databases or hierarchical databases, because that creates a lot of complications, right? Okay, so we are at 10:27. I think we'll just take you through one more slide just to give you some information. I think all of you would be very familiar, or some of you might be even using some of them. These sort of databases, right? MySQL been there for ages, Oracle has been there for ages, IBM has been there for ages. Amazon Redshift is not very old. It's not very new also, but Amazon is making headway in terms of database management systems. So Google has their own. Mongo is a very famous one that you will come across. Does a lot of there's a lot of flexibility with Mongo. SQL has been there for ages. Cassandra is again a part of I think part of Google, or rather open source. So Cassandra is another famous one that people are now shifting to, because what you need to understand is some of these database systems, right? Now IBM, MySQL or SQL, actually IBM DB2 and Oracle, they come with a lot of licensing fees, right? And this is something that I want to talk about in detail a little later. Gone are the days where you need to think, oh my god, there's only one solution, right? There are so many solutions out there, and so much of flexibility is now created because of the technology that we have. Unlike those days, I remember when we were in the banking industry, we had this IBM 2, or rather IBM server farm that we had, and all we could do was do stuff on it. We couldn't. There was so much of inflexibility, right? Nothing we could do, and the systems that were running was AS400. I mean, I know that certain places they still run AS400. AS400 only could work with them, right? And the operators working in the bank had to kind of learn coding in certain things to actually get the information they want. It's such a cumbersome process. But we don't do that anymore, right? We have so much of, even a person who has no understanding of databases can actually work off systems that use databases now, right? Nobody is expected to know the inside out of databases anymore, right? So these are some of the I just wanted to show this slide to you, so that you understand that there are other options, not just Oracle, not just IBM, not just MySQL, and and if you look at the world today, these are the top. So there are two aspects: top 20, top 30 odd database systems that are that the world is using now, right? And there are so many options. Some of them are actually open source, which doesn't bind you to too many licenses. Others have now if you take IBM and Oracle and MySQL or SQLite or things like that, and of course you have Microsoft SQL Server, which again binds you to a lot of legal and what do you call cost related contractual obligations. You don't have to go with them. I'm just telling you, don't think the world is very small anymore. Think of there are so many solutions which are extremely flexible. You don't need so much of processing power, and these are all cloud based, right? Now everybody is on the cloud, everything is on cloud, and there are lots of interrelated, now there are databases that work with each other, right? Now if you take Amazon RDS, it works very well with MySQL, even with SAP related ERP systems, right? And Hadoop is another famous one that people are using. Mongo works with Hadoop, Mongo works with MySQL. So there are so many interrelated things that you can do. So don't, especially for the ones who are in IT, don't think, oh my god, the world is very small still. Options are available. The concept has to be properly understood. Okay, everyone. So I think it's 10:32. We'll take a quick break. Let's come back in 15 minutes by 10:47 to be precise. So let's come back by 10:47. Let's take a quick break, and let's rejoin our conversation at that point.